I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video. Well, I know some of you wanted me to talk about this, so here I am talking about it. Recently, the guy who did the alternate endings for Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle and Godzilla the Planet Eater released another kaiju-based animation, Shin Hedorah. And I have a few thoughts about it. It's a nearly 20-minute long film, so it's one of the longer things he's done, at least as far as I've seen. And I think I like it, but I don't necessarily love it, and I'm gonna explain why. The basic idea is that it's a similar setup to Shin Godzilla, where there's a disturbance out in the water, and from that rises a monster. Only in this case, Hedorah rises already in his final form, and the military's already in the city, so they were probably expecting him. And about halfway through, they implement the method that they used to destroy Hedorah in the original Godzilla vs. Hedorah, but that only works for a brief time, because when they were shooting at Hedorah in the water, the pieces that flew off of him grew into other Hedorahs that jump back onto the dried up corpse, re-solidify him and cause him to mutate, and things only get worse from there. And in terms of flow, it's not bad. Yet again, this is a piece that is primarily focused on the monster. There are people in this. We see a couple of human beings, but we don't really get to know them because there's nothing to get to know. They don't have any dialogue. They don't really give any hints about where they're coming from or what they're trying to accomplish other than just killing the monster. They're just there to let us know that there are people in this city, there are people operating these vehicles, and for the way the film is, that's all we really need. Yet again, we could look at this and add it to the ever-growing pile of evidence that you can do a kaiju story where the presence of humanity is either slim or non-existent. It might have benefited from a little more human presence, which I'll get into later, but for what it is, it's easy to tell what's going on, it's easy to follow the whole way through. What little we do see of the humans interacting does make them feel like they could be real people if this was ever expanded, but otherwise that's all we get. And there are some interesting things that the guy does with Hedorah. For example, you may notice in this shot behind me, Hedorah's lasers that come out of his eyes are going in different directions. This is because of a little thing he did where Hedorah's eyes basically move independently of each other like a chameleon's, which is an interesting touch. It makes Hedorah feel a bit weirder, a bit more alien, a bit more unnatural, even though there is precedent in the natural world for that sort of thing. Just having his eyes move that way is creepy, and it makes Hedorah look creepier. And it also allows him to do what you see him doing behind me. He can direct his lasers anywhere as opposed to just straight ahead like the original. Visually, again, really good. If you've seen the guy's other works, you know that he is good at animation. And, well, this is no exception. The only thing I really noticed that didn't quite look right, well, there are 2 things. When we see humans without gas masks, which only happens one time, he looks plastic. He doesn't really look that good. Clearly not as much effort was put into him. And you could say the same with some of the vehicles, particularly the ships. They look a little flat, a little plasticky, if you will. But the main focus clearly was making Hedorah look good. But that brings the other thing up. I noticed in some shots it looked like there was a lot of artifacting in Hedorah's textures, but that was only in a couple of shots. For the most part, he looks good, he moves well, maybe not necessarily Pixar levels, but the guy's doing this basically independently. He doesn't have Pixar resources. We can't really hold him to that same standard per se. For what we're looking at right here, that is good. it doesn't make me want to gouge my eyes out. Or really, it doesn't make me want to turn it off even. It's good to look at. It is visually interesting, and when you're dealing with animation in particular, that's really important. So I have no qualms with the animation aside from a few little things that honestly I can overlook. Even the twist I spoke about, where about halfway through they fry Hedorah like they do in the original film, that's very well handled. It's an interesting little spin on it, because in Godzilla vs. Hedorah, that was the key to killing the Smog Monster. Get him between those giant microwave panels and cook him. That was the trick. Of course, they needed Godzilla's help ultimately to pull it off. Godzilla's not in this. But it was interesting to see how they did this in the short film as well, and it seems to work, but there was something they weren't prepared for. Actually, kind of similar to what we saw in Godzilla vs. Hedorah, where there was another Hedorah, but rather than springing out of Hedorah's corpse to try getting away and come back to fight another day, here, they were already out there, and they just come back and make the original alive again and even more powerful than before. So, nice spin on it. Interesting little twist there. You took something familiar, you made us think, okay, it's gonna work, but then what's the rest of this thing gonna be about? Oh, I see. And yeah, that was a good way to handle it. Overall, this is good. But you'll note that I said at the beginning, I liked this, but I didn't really love it. So, why? Here's the thing about those other animations that this guy did. The ones that were the alternate endings to the Polygon movies. They were actual improvements on what came before. The Polygon movies, they were about as bad as a Godzilla movie could ever get. Absolute bottom of the barrel, if you ask me. So, anything you could do to alter that, theoretically would only be an improvement. At least when this guy did it, it was an improvement. When he did the alternate ending for City on the Edge of Battle, he made the choice to actually include Mechagodzilla. Not a city that we're supposed to believe was grown from Mechagodzilla. It's actually Mechagodzilla. And in doing so, the entire ending was altered. The ending of City on the Edge of Battle, as it actually is now, was basically the same ending as Planet of the Monsters, except in a different terrain. But with the alternate ending this guy did, just having it be a fight between Godzilla and Mechagodzilla changed everything. And yes, it was different from the other times you've seen it. I know the argument is always, but we've seen Godzilla fight Mechagodzilla 500 or 600 times before. Why do we need to see it again? That alternate ending made it clear why we needed to see it again, because we'd never seen it done like that before. And it worked. It worked so much better. And the alternate ending for the Planet Eater did the same thing. It brought King Ghidorah into the mix, not just as 3 glowing strands of linguini. It was actually Ghidorah manifesting in our universe, manipulating reality, doing things that we've never seen Ghidorah do before, and basically making him into the Lovecraftian horror that they were trying to paint him out to be. It was so much more interesting than just watching a nearly static image of Ghidorah's impossibly long neck slowly lifting the Godzilla topiary into the air, while there's a running side commentary that's trying really desperately to convince us that this is actually interesting because of a whole bunch of stuff we can't see. I mean, given the choice, what would you rather watch, really? It did steal a little bit from Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019 in how it incorporated Mothra, which, again, like, not the most original thing, but at the same time, it still actually brought Mothra into the ending. It made Mothra matter. Mothra wasn't just a shadow who just happens to do one little thing that, honestly, you could argue could have been written out. Mothra is actually part of the finale in that. So again, I'm saying all of that to let you know that I realize this guy is good. I realize he can do great things. But this short is based on Shin Godzilla. And being based on Shin Godzilla, it inherits Shin Godzilla's faults. Now, I could say that the lack of human character development is part of that, but like I already said, the Shin Hedorah short isn't really focused on the humans. It's there to let us know that there are actual people being affected by Hedorah's attack, and that's all we really need to know. In Shin Godzilla, we spend most of our time with the human characters, and we don't get to know a single one of them beyond what they are doing to move the plot forward. That was the big problem with the human cast in Shin Godzilla. So I can't really do that as a proper comparison. That's not even apples and oranges. That's apples and wooden bookshelves. So that's not what I'm talking about here. Not this time. Rather, I speak about the depiction of the kaiju. Now, I will say that it makes more sense for Hedorah to develop mutations that allow him to shoot lasers from different parts of his body than it ever did for Godzilla. He winds up growing eyes all over him like a Shoggoth, and from those eyes lasers can fire, just like with his normal eyes. And, you know, it's similar to when Godzilla does the rock and roll laser show from his back and his tail, but it makes more sense here. I will give it that. However, one of my issues with the Shin Godzilla depiction of the G-Man was that it didn't really feel like it was Godzilla. It didn't really feel like it was playing into the stuff that truly made Godzilla what he is. And I kind of feel like the same thing plays into this version of Hedorah. Think about it. Just off the top of your head, what is Hedorah's primary defining trait? Just first thing that comes to your mind when you think about Hedorah. Pollution, right? That's the defining thing about Hedorah. It's right there in his name even. He is the smog monster. He is the embodiment of how mankind has polluted the planet and completely ravaged the environment. That is his MO. Everything else that comes after that helps make him a more fleshed out character, yes, but the foundation is that he is a pollution monster. That doesn't really play into this short. Like, okay, early on he shoots piles of gloop at the tanks and copters and everything that are attacking him, but they just act like mud balls, really. They stick to the vehicles, hold them in place, maybe crush them a little, but we don't see anything to indicate that they are truly corrosive, like they are somehow destroying the thing that they are getting to. Because the original Hedorah, you couldn't even touch him without burning your skin. That was part of what made him so deadly. He actually corroded and dissolved and destroyed everything around him simply by his very existence. But here, like, I don't recall him ever blasting smog out of his body. He doesn't pollute the air with a black cloud that chokes everything. These aforementioned globs don't dissolve anything. And then, of course, we get to the big finale. Like I said, this is Shin Godzilla based. And what is the centerpiece of Shin Godzilla? When Godzilla just stands in one spot in the middle of Tokyo and has lasers blast out of every orifice in his body, sweeping across the sky and across the cityscape and leveling everything from one spot. Sure, you can say it's an impressive demonstration of power, but it's a very impersonal way of doing it. The original Godzilla, he actually destroys the city directly. He doesn't just stand on the shore and fire his heat ray until he can't see any more buildings. He goes up to the buildings and he takes them down with his bare hands. I just think that's a more interesting way to do it. It makes the attack more personal. Not like what Shin Godzilla did. Shin Godzilla was just an impersonal attack, and therefore, sure, flashy the first time you see it, but it's not really going to stand out as one of the more impressive kaiju moments further down the line. Shin Hedorah does the same thing. Hedorah just stands there and starts firing his red lasers. And also, in addition to being the same sort of impersonal attack, it doesn't really tie into what Hedorah is. It doesn't tie into the fact that he's a pollution monster. Unless red laser beams are some sort of new environmental disaster that I just haven't been told about yet, this is not really emphasizing the pollution part of him. And I think that's a bit of an issue. Really imagine if, like, instead of copying Shin Godzilla and having Hedorah set the city on fire with laser beams, instead he just opened up his body and a black mist came out, and everything it touched began to corrode immediately. Whether it was the tallest skyscraper just dissolving away, or maybe only part of it dissolving and the rest of it crumbling, or a human being who happens to get in the way, and not even that gas mask that was supposed to protect him can prevent him from getting eaten away by this stuff. And then when it's over, the mist clears, well, doesn't really clear, more like settles, and Hedorah is the only thing left standing. I mean, I don't know if that would necessarily be as flashy to look at, but it would be far more in line with what you would think Hedorah would be doing as a pollution-based monster. Here, it just doesn't feel original enough. And look, I realize this is a fan animation. I realize that this guy is operating more or less on his own, if I'm correct, and he's doing this in his spare time. I get that, I really do. And I don't mean to be tearing this thing down. Like I said, I don't hate this thing. I just don't think it's the best I've seen him do. Granted, I'm basing that on how what I've seen him do before was vastly superior to what came before it. This feels more like it's equal to the thing that came before it, but that thing is already something I wasn't particularly fond of. I still think he did a good job overall, and the ending where you see a whole bunch of smaller Hedorahs coming up because more chunks got blown off of him, that certainly makes for a very dark and memorable ending. I just feel like he could have done more than remake Shin Godzilla with a different texture. I know that some people have said that Shin Godzilla the creature actually felt more like Hedorah because he was a transforming creature. To a certain extent that's true, but I think this demonstrates that just because you switch Godzilla out and place Hedorah in, that doesn't necessarily change that much. It doesn't necessarily make for an improvement. Sometimes you can watch something that you despise, and then you can watch something completely different that does the same thing, but because of the different context you like it. Unfortunately, this is not one of those times for me. I will say that I do think Shin Hedorah is better. I really want you to remember that. I'm not hating on this thing. I just know that I've seen this guy do better, and I hope he does do better in the future. As for this, it is what it is, I suppose. I'm not overly thrilled with it, but, you know, I appreciate the effort he put into it, and that's about all I can say for now. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omniviewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.